Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the 6th episode of Morrowind Modding Interviews. With me tonight is Melchior Dahrk, author of a number of popular mods such as Azurian Expansion and new Gnaar Mok, and of course the project lead for Lythidonia. And thanks for agreeing to this interview.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
We're going to start off with a few basic questions, the first of which is, when did you first start playing Morrowind and the Elder Scrolls in general?
Well, Morrowind was actually my first Elder Scrolls game. I started playing Morrowind on the Xbox back in 2004. So little bit after it was released, and then later on after that, after I had played, I'd probably beaten the main quest twice, and every single quest in the game twice on the Xbox. I played the heck out of that game back then. I finally got a copy for the PC whenever I decided that I absolutely had to experience some of the cool mods that I saw that people were making for it. And then later on, I actually waited for the Game of the Year edition for both Oblivion and Skyrim before ever playing either of those games. So once again, I was kind of late to the party, but did get around to them eventually.
Speaking of those games, you are obviously still playing Morrowind, so do you still play Oblivion and Skyrim as well, or did you just sort of come back to Morrowind after each one came out?
Oblivion, I pretty much played through that game once and called it good. I actually just recently got Skyrim though, so I'm still playing that game. I actually didn't buy Skyrim until the Elder Scrolls Anthology came out, and even once the Anthology came out, I waited until it was on sale for $20 on Amazon. So I only recently got Skyrim, so I'm actually still playing through that one.
Oh yeah, I was about to say, the Anthology was only about a year ago, I think.
Yes, something like that. And even once it came out, like I said, I waited a little while afterwards. I guess I'm cheap like that. There's, some games I don't like paying the full price for them. So, and I'm fairly patient. I've got plenty of other games that I could be playing, so I could wait.
Well, yeah, as the old saying goes, if it's not Morrowind, it's not really worth the full price.
Exactly. That's what I always say.
Anyway, moving on. What was your first mod, and how did you get the idea for it?
Oh, my first mod was like many modders, it was something of a house mod, except I actually started off with making an island at the mouth of the Odai River. I think I just called it my island, and it, as other first time modders, it was just a mod that I wanted to make so that my players could have a unique place to call home. And so I actually had the whole layout was sketched out in my modding notebook, but I never actually ended up going very far with that one. I think it was, I used it more as just kind of an introduction to the construction set itself. So before very long, I lost interest, and so, but I kept working on lots of other mods, and then the first one that I actually tried releasing was a shop that I put into Pelagiat, and it was just using vanilla assets and all of that, but I made a lot of unique items for the merchant to sell, but whenever I was working on this, obviously it involved interiors, but at this point I didn't have any knowledge. I didn't know about the excuse me, the grid snap feature, so it was rough, man. It was, I just kind of eyeballed everything trying to line it up, and then I tried releasing this mod onto Morrowind Summit, but I don't remember which moderator it was, but they responded and told me that they were no longer accepting cheat mods. So I think it was in reference to to a couple of the items I had in there, which I thought they were well protected by the level 100 guard that I had stationed nearby. But I think they might have also made a comment about the terrible alignment of the interior cell.
Oh yes, Morrowind Summit back in the day, they actually had administrators go through each mod that was submitted before it actually passed quality control and got released. So back then it was a lot harder to get a mod out there into the community than it is, like, say, today.
Right. And so I'm not easily discouraged. So I kept working on personal mods for quite a while after that. But it was a little while before I ventured to actually try releasing a mod. And I can't remember if at this point it was still Morrowind Summit or if it was Planet Elder Scrolls now. I'd have to go and check the dates, but later on, the first mod that I actually released to the community was a house mod that I made called Leijon Hill.
Oh yes, I think I remember that one. I have not played it, but I distinctly remember seeing it on Planet Elder Scrolls.
Yeah, I was pretty, and I guess I still am pretty proud of that mod. I had seen the technique used previously on a couple different mods, but never this extensively, where I made it a walk-in house, so you didn't have to teleport to the interior cell. You could just walk right in the front door, walk upstairs, go down to the basement without ever leaving the exterior world space. So I was pretty proud of that back in the day, to be able to accomplish it with just using vanilla resources.
Oh yes, even today there's not really a whole lot of exterior houses, so to speak. I know of maybe one or two other ones. There was one released for temporary built by the mod author Ziff, I think. I haven't seen him around in a few years. He joined the temporary built team, but other than that, I can't really think of any.
Yeah, I don't see them too often, and I think it's pretty cool to be able to do it. But at the same time, it makes it so that it may not necessarily fit in with the original game perfectly, just because every other interior that you go to, you have to actually teleport to it. But it's definitely a lot of fun to experience, play with those sorts of mods.
Oh yeah, in the end, it's probably just as well that Bethesda segregated the interiors from the exteriors, because, no, even today on modern systems, if you have too many objects in the same cell, it's going to lag like crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think even that mod that I made, the Leijon Hill, I think I was fairly light on the amount of items that I had in there. I wasn't too crazy on the detailing back then. Well, I guess even nowadays I'm not too crazy on the detailing in interiors anyway. So, but yeah, absolutely a concern and a good reason why those are separated.
Moving on to another question. What's the story behind your screen name, Melchior Dahrk?
That's a good question. Well, I guess it's, if I'd have to kind of separate it. It's the name of the first character that I ever played through the entire Morrowind main quest and all the quest lines, all the miscellaneous quests. I spent a lot of time with this character, and so, but it's always somewhat difficult for me to come up with names for any of my characters in video games. I'll sit there and I'll think about it. I'll go look around, try to get ideas for what to name them. So for this particular character, he was a dark elf, Nightblade, I believe. And so I was trying to think of a name. I looked through. I think I even like opened up some of my parents' baby books and stuff, trying to come up with a good name for this guy, and I ended up flipping through a hymnal that my parents had lying around, and I think and for those who may get this reference, it actually is not was not inspired by one of the three wise men who are historically called. One of them is called Melchior, but it was, I think it's just some author, some name that I happened to come across in there. I thought it sounded cool, but I wanted him to have a last name as well, and so really, it's Dahrk is taken from Dahrk Mazalf, that Dwemer that you run across in the game. So I kind of took those, combined them, and I liked the way it looked, and it stuck.
Ah, that honestly sounds like quite a lot of effort for a name, honestly.
I know, and that's the thing. Like every single time that I tried to seriously think about naming a character in a video game, it honestly I can sit there for, it can take me an hour just to come up with something that I think is good enough, and I'll go through iterations on trying to come up with names. Just, I don't know, it's something that I do. It takes me time. It doesn't, I guess it may not come to me easily to think up a name which passes muster.
Sort of an interesting process. You really get into role playing, then, I take it.
You might think that I would, based on that, but say for me, I've tried to get into serious role playing before, but I always seem to kind of fall out of it. I'll go and I'll think up some elaborate backstory for my character, but then once I actually get into the game, they somehow end up being being a neutral character who's just out for their own benefit, and then I'll say that they're a savant, and so they just want to learn more about the world, which pretty much allows my character to go and do whatever they want. So I just kind of fall out of it. It's difficult for me to remain in character with my characters, and so I've tried, and I'd like to. I think in Skyrim I could maybe get into role playing a little bit more easily than Morrowind, but I haven't tried it in that game yet.
Well, sort of moving back to the regular interview questions. What would you say draws you to modding video games?
Well, modding is my creative outlet. Always enjoyed, creating new worlds or expanding upon existing ones. And then whenever I got into gaming, I always looked around to try to find the editor. I wanted to make new things. And then whenever I got Morrowind for the computer, for the PC, and I found the CS. Well, I knew getting the PC that it had the CS, because I mainly got it because I was interested in seeing the mods that have been created for it. So whenever I tried out the construction set, it was one of the most powerful editors I had encountered up to this point, and so I was just hooked right off the bat, and the things that I could make with that editor, with the CS.
Since you mention it, I'm kind of curious. Did you have experience with an editor or a construction set before Morrowind? Or was Morrowind like your introduction into modding?
Morrowind was kind of my introduction into modding, an action sort of action RPG sort of game, where it's third person, that sort of thing. And actually before modding Morrowind, interestingly, most of the games that I edited or used editors for were RTS games. Things like StarCraft, Warcraft 3, Civilization 3, Age of Empires first and second. A lot of those, and even I think some Command and Conquer games. So it was actually mostly RTSs that I had done. I think before coming to Morrowind, I hadn't really done this type of modding or editing of a game. Most of what I had done before was creating maps, or in Warcraft 3 I had tinkered around with making quests and that sort of thing with the editor. Editor for Warcraft 3 is actually pretty powerful. What you can do with that game is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, now before Morrowind came out, really, a lot of RTS games really sort of set the benchmark for editors. I mean, I remember I got my start using an RTS editor as well, and those were really common back in the day.
Right. I mean, pretty much, most RTSs that you would play, they'd have some sort of map editor. They would just vary on, what you could do in them. And I remember making quest lines in Age of Empires and Warcraft 3, with the editors, and it was a lot of fun. I don't think I ever really released any of those. It was mostly just for me to use and just to mess around with. And sometimes my brothers would play maps that I had created and that sort of thing.
Sort of going into that, have you been influenced by any non-Elder Scrolls games when you mod?
Yes, definitely. I would say, well, next to Morrowind, actually, the Final Fantasy games, specifically 10 and 12, are among my all-time favorite games. So whatever I do in modding, there's definitely going to be some sort of influence from those games, especially 12. I would say a lot of my ideas for what I want to see in particular areas are heavily influenced by different areas in Final Fantasy 12, and so I've taken a lot of inspiration from those, but more than just those two games. I mean, really, now that whenever I got into modding, um, really, anytime I'm playing any game, or even if I'm, traveling or just browsing the internet or whatever I'm doing, I'm always kind of on the lookout for something which could inspire me, or could potentially be used conceptually in a mod that I'm either working on or I hadn't even thought of creating yet. So inspiration can come from anywhere, really.
So would you say that you draw influence and inspiration from a wide variety of video game genres and art styles?
Yes, I would say that. I don't know if I can name, any others in particular right now. I mean, for Elder Scrolls game, I have taken a lot of inspiration from Skyrim while I've been playing that game. As far as other games, I mean, pretty much any game that I'm playing, like even Guild Wars 2, I own that game and I play it every now and then. I'm not a big MMO fan, so I actually don't play Guild Wars 2 for the MMO aspect of it. I actually play it mainly just because I think it's a beautiful game. There's a lot of really amazing areas to visit in that. So I've taken a lot of inspiration from that MMO in particular.
Sort of going into that, do you get a lot of inspiration for mods while actually playing Morrowind? I mean, you've released a lot of small mods over the years, so I'm kind of interested if you were inspired by something in particular at the moment.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, definitely any time that I'm playing Morrowind, which unfortunately nowadays seems to be fairly infrequently, but yes, I mean, Morrowind is the biggest source of inspiration. Is the source of inspiration that's kind of, to me, it's so obvious. I may not even mention it. I mean, most of the mods that I've created have been because I was playing and I noticed something which was lacking, or that I wanted my character to have, or something like that. I mean, specifically for an example, I'm thinking of the Pearls Enhanced mod that I made. I mean, the idea for that was hatched whenever I made an Argonian character, where my vision for him was that I wanted him to kind of be a diver. I made him a custom class to be a diver, and I was going to have him exploring the shores and grottos of Vardenfell. For this character, obviously, Abbott's water life was a must. So I had that mod, which was fantastic. But I found while I was pearl diving that the call-ups were pretty boring to loot. Basically, they either did or did not have an ordinary pearl in them, and so And so I decided to make a mod which would make pearl diving more exciting and rewarding by adding different qualities of pearls. And then I even made a version of the mod which added colored versions to multiply the variety even beyond that. And that was actually thanks to the help of a fellow modder named Arcala, who helped me out with the icons and textures. So that was kind of before I even nowadays, I guess I'm not really a whole lot into texturing, but so she helped out making those for me. And that was kind of also when I first started getting a little bit more involved with the community, because I actually had a little bit some help from a couple other people on making that mod as well.
Since you mentioned Pearls Enhanced, one of the things I noticed when I was playing that was that, well, it sort of reminded me of Oblivion, really, since they sort of had the same sort of pearl setup. Obviously not as varied, but, you had your flawless pearls, you had your flawed pearls, and a few other different varieties.
Yeah, I couldn't say. Well, for me personally, I definitely wasn't inspired by Oblivion. I actually don't remember the exact release date on that. I feel like it was around or maybe a little bit before Oblivion was released, but yeah, it's just for me even beyond pearls. It's cool to have different varieties of objects or creatures or that sort of thing. It just makes the world more interesting to experience.
Oh yes, definitely. It's one of the mods I love playing with is Shrai's Alchemy mod, which is understandably a bit outdated now, but uh, that sort of variety really does add a lot of excitement to the world, I would say.
Oh yeah, it definitely does, and I like some of some other mods that I've created have been kind of pointed towards increasing the variety, in other ways as well. Even the project I'm working on right now, the of Ash and Blight mod. Um, in that mod, I'm one of the things I'm trying to work on there is to actually make it so there's more items available to the player and actually making it so they are used by the Dunmer to create various things, and so it just makes it more interesting to have those items available, even if they're not going to be useful for beating down a tough opponent. For me, it just makes the world feel more alive.
Speaking of Ash and Blight, obviously we talked about it in the warm-up before the recording started, but for the purpose of the interview, could you tell us a bit about that project?
Yeah. So Avashin Blight is basically my personal overhaul of Morrowind. So I think there's a couple other modders and who have made these sorts of things over the years. Obviously, the most well known is Morrowind Rebirth by Transmaster, and so this is kind of my own personal project where I've got my vision of Morrowind, which is a harsher world where it's very influenced by the concept art that was made for Morrowind. And it's I've got a lot of things that I've created so far for that mod. Different items. I've worked on adding detail to a couple different settlements. It's been somewhat on the back burner. I've been working on Lythidonia, but it's anytime that I'm not modding Lythidonia, I'm going to be modding of Ash and Blight. It's something that I'm very passionate about to get my own thoughts on Morrowind implemented into the game. I've got a very lengthy planning document that I've put together over the last year or two on that project. So I've put a lot of thought into how I want to execute it and what all I want to include.
Since you mentioned it, what sort of planning do you do before you start a mod, and what is your planning process exactly?
Well, it varies from mod to mod, I suppose. Back whenever I first started modding, I actually used to keep modding notebooks. I'd have a physical notebook that I would jot down all my notes, and whenever I would go and test, I'd take down more notes. Um, I've kind of stopped doing that as much. Nowadays with a lot of my smaller mods, now that I think a little bit more familiar with the construction set, it's not, I don't know if it's not as necessary or if I'm just lazy about them now, but now I don't seem to, for smaller projects, really do a whole lot of planning. I just kind of have an idea and I go make it happen. But for larger projects like Lythidonia or Avashin Blight, um, I definitely put a lot of thought into planning those projects. So, like I mentioned for Avashin Blight, I've pretty much just got one master planning document where I separate it out into different categories of how I want to change the world of Morrowind, and then I just talk about make notes to myself on what I want to change and modify. And then for Lythidonia, it's fairly similar. I've just got I keep a lot of documents. I use Google Docs. So I keep it online so I can access it anywhere. So if I've got an idea while I'm not at home, I can still go in and take notes on something that I had just thought of or some inspiration which I might have had. So yeah, for me it's just now it's I guess really my the physical notebooks that I used to keep have kind of transferred to online, to being on the cloud.
Now, sort of moving on to a different topic. Do you listen to any music while you mod? And if so, what is it in particular you like to listen to?
Yes, I do listen to music while I mod. The main things I listen to are, obviously, to me anyway, the Morrowind soundtrack. I listen to that fairly often, and then other than that, I do listen to the Final Fantasy 10 and 12 soundtracks fairly frequently. I just find that those three tracks they're very inspiring because each track will remind me of a different area or of a certain experience I had while I was playing any of those games. Um, but if I'm not in the mood for something atmospheric like that, I'll probably just put my music playlist on shuffle. Or nowadays, I'll mod while I'm listening to one of these modding interviews.
I'm sort of curious. A lot of Final Fantasy music has sort of been remixed at like OC Remix. Do you listen to a lot of that?
No, no, I just listened to the OST for both of those. I don't for the Final Fantasy X. I don't even listen to the new remixed or remastered version that they released recently. I still listen to the original for all three of those soundtracks.
Oh, so I take it you listen to the original Tuzanakind then?
Oh yes, absolutely. That's one of my all-time favorite game soundtracks.
Oh yes, it is definitely a classic. It's always so moving, emotionally.
It is. It is. It's one of the ones that almost brings a tear to my eye just from remembering that game. It's a very very good game. I think it's definitely has a fairly large emotional had a fairly large emotional impact on me whenever I played through it.
Sort of moving on. Uh, I noticed that a lot of your mods involve making new models and textures. Are there any particular programs you like to use for this purpose?
Yeah, definitely. For 3D modeling, nowadays I use Blender. It's a very powerful program, and I find it very easy to use. But a lot of the older models of mine that you might see in some of my mods, those were put together with NifScope. Um, I use NifScope the longest time. It was a lot of fun to, and it still is, to mash different meshes together, and it's a fairly powerful tool in its own right, really. It's and it really it's an amazing tool for modding Morrowind, and it like I mentioned, it really cooperates very well with the way I mod. I like taking something and then making something new out of it. For instance, I like using meshes in the construction set in new ways, like building a house out of wall screens, like I did for Leijon Hill, or using a stool to be a lantern cover, or making a desk out of tables and dressers. And in the same way with Nifscope, beyond what I could do in the construction set, I could now make a new set of armor out of Siltstrider husks, or give a flame atronach weapons, or put the pack guar equipment onto a boar. So really, I mean, it was I used Nifscope for the longest time before I ever really felt the need to get into 3D modeling with Blender. So, and it really, the possibilities are limitless for what you can do in Nifscope. Well, I should take that back. They're not limitless, and that's why I did end up going to Blender whenever I felt that I absolutely had to create something completely brand new to put into my game. And so that's where, obviously the skills for 3D modeling become useful as a modder. As far as textures go, texturing is not something that I personally feel that I'm incredibly skilled at, though I think I have improved since I first started modding. But whenever I do put a texture together, I typically use Photoshop, just because it's such a powerful tool. But I have also used Paint.net and GIMP in the past, and both of those can most of the time create what I need them to.
Now, I've heard from a lot of modders that they use Nifscope and Blender, but are these programs that you would recommend for someone who's just getting started in doing 3D modeling, or would you think it would be possibly too difficult for a newbie, so to speak?
I think that anyone who's first getting into and interested in putting some new models into tomorrow and making some new meshes for it, I think that Nifscope is a great program to start off with. It, for one thing, it gets you it familiarizes you with how Morrowind reads and handles the mesh file. So there's a lot that you can learn and accomplish just by understanding what the various nodes and properties are, and what they do, and what you can tweak about them in Nifscope by itself, and have a direct impact on what you see in the game. Um, so like I said, I only moved on to Blender whenever I decided that I absolutely had to create something brand new. Um, so once you have that need, of course you gotta have a 3D modeling program, and I think that Blender is a pretty easy to use tool. I honestly, I haven't used a lot of other 3D modeling tools extensively, so I couldn't give a good comparison to how it shapes up to some others. But just looking at it by itself, Blender works very well to create 3D models for Morrowind. But like I said, I think Nifscope is really a great starting point for someone like me who had no 3D modeling experience going into this.
Now, moving on, your big project these days is Lythidonia, the Azurian Isles, which I believe now has a 6-month deadline before it gets to beta, thanks to a previous interview. Is there anything you can tell us about this new landmass?
Yes, I did hear that 6 month deadline that I've got now, and I'm working towards trying to make sure I can hit that, at least for the alpha release. Unfortunately, as some people might have seen, my laptop, which is thankfully functioning okay enough to be able to do this interview, is kind of on the fritz. So anytime I try to open up the construction set or anything, it shuts down, and so it's not any good there. So I'm gonna have to see if I'll still be able to hit that deadline. But now I've got the clock is ticking. So thank you, Pluto and Dark Elf guy, for that one. But talking about my project, Lythidonia, I guess there's really two angles that I could talk about it from, both mine and then the users, the players who would actually be experiencing it. From the player's perspective, Lythidonia is a large landmass that's inhabited by an outcast group of Chimer who fervently worship the Daedra prince Azura. So, but even they are divided between the metropolitan House Azura and then the backwater islanders who live in the southern portion of the archipelago. So, and then through the main quest that I've designed for this mod, you'll get to uncover the secret behind mysterious disturbance or disappearances which have been going on in the Isles, and then go up against a dangerous new power that's emerging from the void. And I don't want to give away too much because I've been kind of guarding my plans for the main quest so far. But it's I think it should be a lot of fun for players to go through that, go through the main quest that I've got planned. Um, and then other than that, there should just be a lot to see and do in Lythidonia. Especially once it reaches the 1.0 release. But in the meantime, as we just talked about, I do intend to release an alpha version of the mod soon, which should feature all of the exteriors completely finished. All the landmass would be completed and detailed and populated, and then most of the interiors would be completed in that release. And then it would also include the introductory quest. So that's kind of the mod from the player's perspective. From excuse me, from my perspective, I guess, looking at it maybe more from a historical standpoint. I started working on Lythidonia back in 2007. It was actually unintentionally inspired by a mod which was released then called the Five Keys of Azura by Dave Foster. That was released in May of 2007. Excuse me. And that year, my family was actually planning a vacation down to Florida. Soon after I discovered that mod, the Five Keys of Azura, and so the tropics were on my mind, and I mistook the keys in the title of that mod to be referring to small islands, such as are found at the tip of the Floridian Peninsula. And so it kind of I actually played the mod. I booted it up, and I was like, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna go and explore these tropical islands. I've never seen anything like that before done for Morrowind. And I boot the mod up, and it's the complete opposite of what I expected. It's a Nordic landmass, to the north of Vardenfell. It's a bunch of Nords, and the only similarity to what I thought it would be was that it had some relationship to Azura. And so it kind of, but it had planted that seed in my head of wanting this tropical mod where there were Dunmer who were worshiping Azura. So I kind of had that idea in my head, and so whenever I still went on this vacation, basically I took a notebook with me, and so on the 2 day trip down to the beach, I took notes and sketched out what would later become Lythidonia. At the time, I actually tentatively called the mod the Keys of Azura, and it took me a while to shake that name, and I finally ended up calling it the Azurian Isles, and then the Lyithdonea name that came a little bit later whenever I started implementing some of the Mayor Mary influence into the Isles.
Now, I'm sort of curious. Obviously, Lythidonia is a very large project, probably one of the largest projects I've seen that is currently in production by a single individual. Do you ever have a lot of difficulty keeping up with it all? Since, I mean, you are just one person, you don't have a team behind you, like, say, with Tamriel Rebuilt or with Province Cyrodiil.
I think that it's definitely more work doing it all myself. But I well with that said, I have gotten help from various people in the community, especially for interiors. You yourself, as you know, you donated a few interiors to the project. I've also gotten some from Pluto and a couple other people. I'm sorry, I can't remember your names right now off the top of my head, but and that's been fantastic for me because interiors are actually one of my least favorite things to work on in modding, kind of next to scripting. Scripting, I'm not any good at scripting. And interiors, for some reason, I love doing land masses and exteriors, designing cities, making cliff sides and all that stuff. But for some reason, interiors just doesn't click with me. It's kind of tedious. It's not that I can't do it. It's just, like I said, it's fairly tedious. It takes me a long time to make just one small house. But I'm digressing. Basically, to answer your question, I have gotten help from the community in some areas, but I've actually tried to work with group projects in the past. I did join Tamriel Rebuilt a while back, and I tried to work on some exterior claims for them. But I think when it comes to modding, I don't seem to work very well on a team. I've got my own ideas and my own vision. I know how I want it to look. I know how I want it to be, and so I don't mind taking advice and constructive criticism from people, but I want to control the final decision type of thing. So I think that's one of the reasons why, yes, it might take me a little bit longer to work on it because I'm mostly doing it by myself, but it's the way I work. I function better this way.
Oh yes, team modding is certainly a lot different from individual modding. Teams like Tamriel Built, they really divide the tasks amongst team members, so the person who does the exteriors is not the same person who does the writing or the interiors and all that.
Oh yeah, and whenever I was modding for Tamriel Rebuilt, it was just for me personally, it's like I wanted to make it a certain way, but maybe the group, the team had a different vision. And it was just difficult for me with that, and also the pressure of, okay, I want to finish this in a timely manner. They're wanting me to finish it in a timely manner, but I've lost interest. I'm now working on this other little mod, and it's just it's kind of had that external pressure that I don't have working on my own project, which you need that in a team project to keep it moving forward so that you're making progress. It's good that is there. I'm not criticizing Tamriel Rebuild at all. That's I think that's how it needs to function in order to make progress. But for me personally, I think I just didn't operate very well under it.
Oh yes, modding in particular is sort of a creative hobby that has its ups and downs, its lulls and periods of high activity, and as a result, teams like Temporary Built, they go through cycles of modders. Like one month there might be 30 active modders, the next month there might be 50 active modders.
Right, definitely, and I definitely try to keep keep modding as what it is. It's a hobby for me, and if I find that it's I'm getting bored or I've lost interest, then I'll just stop. I'll go and I'll play Skyrim or something. I'll do something else because you have to I have to avoid getting burned out, and I have gotten burned out in the past, and so there's been periods where I may not have worked on Lythidonia for a couple months. I didn't touch it just because I didn't feel interested. But as it is this also the case with Morrowind, I mean I've always come back to working on Lythidonia, and I'm always working towards getting it done. It's been definitely taken longer than I expected, but a lot has happened in my life in the last 7 years. That's a long time, but yeah, a lot has happened since then. So I don't quite have the free time that I used to whenever I first started this mod. But no fear, it will be finished. I just have to, well, for one thing, I got to get this laptop working again or get a new computer.
Well, you better hurry. I mean, the clock is definitely running now. I'm actually thinking about getting one of those internet web clocks that sort of counts down. I mean, you got that 6-month deadline, so obviously we need to put the pressure on you a little bit more.
uh, this is just the thing I was trying to avoid whenever I stopped working with Tamriel Rebuilt. It's that pressure, but now it's back, and I don't know. I don't know if I can operate under these conditions.
Well, just push through it, and maybe you could set up like a community donation box, like for just one Velothian interior a day. You can bring the beta for Lythidonia just that much closer.
I'll have to think about it. That might not be such a bad idea.
Now, since you've mentioned your laptop problems that you've had recently, I mean, you've also had a lot of other problems that have been mentioned on the forums. You had some problems with cells missing in the construction set with the Lythidonia project. And are you still having a lot of technical drawbacks like that? I mean, clearly your laptop is on the fritz.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, over the years while I've worked on this, I've had, a number of occasions every now and then where the plugin that I'm working on would get corrupted for one reason or another. Little things like if my laptop froze while I was in the middle of saving the plugin or something, then that would corrupt the file. And so if I hadn't backed up the ESP in a certain amount of time or recently, then I could potentially lose some progress there. Obviously, since I was trying to save it at the time, something would be lost. But I wouldn't say there's really been anything pervasive. The only really pervasive technical issue that I've had is just the 0-0 issue, basically the distance from the origin, where in the Morrowind engine, the further the player is from the origin, the 0-0 origin of the game, basically the more unstable the game becomes. Things start shaking, you start getting a lot of Z fighting with meshes. So unfortunately, that's something that I can't really do anything about that right now. I'm kind of got my fingers crossed that whenever my mod gets out there, that Open Morrowind will be around soon, and hopefully that issue will be resolved. Because the only other thing I could do about it would be to actually move my landmass closer to Vardenfell, which would mean being incompatible with with Tamriel Rebuilt.
Now, you mentioned quite a few technical drawbacks there, but despite that, you've been working on this for evidently 7 years now. Is there any advice you can give to other modders on maintaining such massive projects and keep going with them?
Yes, definitely. And I would say right off the bat that don't start it off the way that I did. I started this mod, I guess not really thinking about the final scope that it would have and quite how many resources I would end up including in the mod itself. And so whenever I started it out, basically I had a whole lot of different folders in the meshes and textures. It was just severely disorganized, and unfortunately, it was the same way in the construction set itself, where I was not consistent with the IDs, with what I named the different objects in the construction set, and so what that led to was that it was very difficult for me to find anything. At this point, and some of it might be some bloat that I need to clean out, but at this point, I've got a little over 3,000 meshes that I reference in Lythidonia. There's just a ton of files that I have to reference, and I'm even to this day I'm still working on moving those meshes, those files to an organized directory. So basically now I'm in the process of moving to this, but I'm operating on a process similar to the files in the original game, and similar to how you would see that Tamriel Rebuilt is doing it, where basically I've got a unique folder with subdirectories in it, subfolders in it, where I store files. So I would say, one of the biggest things is for any mod, really, no matter how big or small it is, put those files into unique folders. The meshes, the icons, the textures. It helps to not just for your own sanity to keep it clean, but it also helps other people who are either trying to, I don't know, uninstall the mod or just look up certain files for your mod. If they're trying to find it where an issue is coming from or something, it's good practice, I would say, to keep those files in a separate folder. And then for a project as large as Lythidonia, in the construction set itself, in the plugin, I've found that it's very beneficial for me to, while I'm modding this thing, to have good descriptive names and well categorized names for all the references. So I've got I'll call them similar to what we've got in the original game. I'll say flora or furniture or static. Actually, I don't think I use static. I think I use exterior and that sort of thing. So just keeping it nicely categorized makes it easier. So if I'm building up an area, I can just say, okay, I want some flora, and specifically I'm looking for some flowers that I can detail this area with. It just makes it easier for me, the modder of my own project, to find those files, so that I don't just end up using one flower over and over again, for instance.
Oh yeah, certainly good advice. It is very important to keep meshes and textures well organized, especially if you're planning to release your mod. I've encountered many mods on various modding sites where a mesh was misreferenced, and as a result, it didn't work very well in game. And, well, not to put any pressure on you, of course, but TikTok, TikTok.
Yeah, and when you're talking about different files working properly, one of the things that I discovered later on with my project was the importance of properly implementing collision on different meshes. Whenever I first started modding Lythidonia, that was back whenever I was only using Nifscope. I hadn't, excuse me, I hadn't started using Blender for anything yet, and so I was just going crazy in Nifscope, mashing all these different meshes together, not giving any thought whatsoever to how I had completely broken the collision on those meshes because I had scaled down something that was gigantic to be something tiny or vice versa. And so basically I would open up my game to test my mod out, and I couldn't walk on something, or I'd get stuck on something invisible. And so now much later on I've learned how to very easily and quickly create collision meshes, or if necessary for various plants and stuff, to make it so they don't have any collision at all. So that's just been something that's now even to this day I'm still cleaning up my previous mess of not paying any heed to properly creating those meshes.
Oh, yes, collision boxes are always sort of a headache with certain models. Like, I've encountered a few, like, I think it's vert trees for the Bitter Coast, maybe. It's like they're beautiful looking trees, but they have a 5-foot collision box surrounding them, and they just completely block off certain paths.
Yeah, what I found with a lot of tree mods and plant mods and that sort of thing is that the author often doesn't add a collision model, and so game will actually take both the trunk of the tree and the leaves and just set them all to collide with the player based on just the faces, the vertices on those models. Whereas what should be done is the player should only be colliding with the trunk of the tree, and it's something that's very easy to set up. But I have seen it on, I think, at least a couple of verts mods, and plenty of other mods I've seen it slip through as well, where I think the author just either doesn't understand how collision is handled in Morrowind, or they just didn't feel like taking the time because nobody sees that anyway, and so what they're really concerned about is how the tree looks or whatever.
Oh, yes, and it certainly sort of ruins playability to a certain extent if you have that sort of thing going on, particularly with blocking paths and blocking access to particular areas like interiors.
Exactly, and that's why I a lot of the time I spend half the time I spend modding Lythidonia. A lot of it is spent on cleaning up files, and adding collision to various resources that I use. Honestly, what people may find whenever I release the alpha of Lythidonia is that I've used a lot of resources for this mod, obviously, and what you may find if you look closely is that pretty much every single one of the resources that I've used for Lythonia has been modified in some way, optimized, really. So if I've got, just because I wanted to run quickly and I wanted to perform well in the game, and I wanted to have the correct collision and that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of like plant resources and stuff that I've used that I've corrected the collision on, or I've fixed the colors on it or something like that. So for any modders that are downloading my mod whenever I release it, definitely take a look at the files that are in there. If it looks like a resource you're familiar with, odds are I've fixed it or optimized it in some way or another.
Now, sort of moving on to your other mods, one of the things that strikes me is that you're kind of one of the more prolific mod authors in the community, at least these days. And the thing that I've noticed is that just how all over the place you are with modding. You don't stick to a particular type of modding. You've done town expansions, you've done tweak mods, you've done modders resources, you've done NPC-like mods with new creatures and things. Is there any particular area that you really like?
Whenever I first started modding, the thing that I loved doing the most was creating new creatures, and that's kind of what led to me making my dark creatures mod. And I think that around that time, whenever I was first discovering Nifscope, I also made a flame atronach mod where I gave it weapons or something like that. So initially, and still today, I do as well. I really like making creatures. Unfortunately, nowadays I've kind of think my pickiness over what a good creature looks like has heightened, and so I'm kind of limited by the fact that I'm not fantastic at texturing, and so to me, I haven't made as many creatures nowadays as I used to in the past. But nowadays, if I were to pick a particular area of modding that I like the most, it would absolutely hands down be landscaping. Making cities and making making different areas, valleys and mountains and that sort of thing. It's just a lot of fun, and it's very very rewarding to me to be able to create it and then jump into the game and see it. So I'd say that's my favorite. But as you said, I've done a lot of different things, and all of them are fun in their own ways. The one thing that I've never really gotten into too much is scripting, and that probably just comes from the fact that I don't code, I don't really do any of that. I can script, especially if I've got scripting for dummies open right next to me, so I know what the heck I'm doing. But um, everything else, really, I've done it, and I do enjoy it.
Now, is there any particular mod that you've released that you're most proud of?
Well, that's a tough question. Um, I guess I would say that if I had to pick one, it would be my Dunmer Lanterns Replacer. And I'd say that mainly that's because most people who are playing Morrowind nowadays are using those lanterns. They're using my lanterns because Kingpix approached me and asked if he could include those in the Morrowind graphics overhaul, and so and of course I allowed him to put those in there happily. I was flattered that he wanted to include them, and so now every time I see a screenshot with my lanterns in it, I get to point at it and say, "That's my lantern. I made that." And it's just rewarding for me as a modder to see other people enjoying my work.
I had not actually realized that those were your lantern replacers in MGSO, and it certainly is a sort of the standard Morrowind installation now, so basically your mod's just everywhere.
Right, right, and like I said, so now I see pictures of them everywhere, and like I said, it's very rewarding. It's great that other people can enjoy something that I created, and it was that mod in particular was a lot of fun for me to make, just because the the lanterns in Morrowind already without my replacer, they're one of my favorite aspects of the game. I think they really add to the atmosphere of the Dunmer as a culture, as a cultural group. And so it was difficult for me whenever I went to make those models. I was like, well, I already like the way they look. What the heck am I going to change about them? And so I kind of just approached it as, okay, I'm just going to add something new as opposed to just smoothing these things. I don't want to just smooth them out like I've seen in other replacers. I wanted to actually try and add detail to the models, which the original creators of the game couldn't or just didn't add because of the limitations imposed on the face count and that sort of thing. So I instead of just smoothing them out, I took it from the aspect of wanting to add detail to them, and I'm very proud of the way it turned out. I use them obviously in my own game as well, and I love the way they look.
Oh yes, the Dunmer Lanterns are probably one of my favorite light sources in Morrowind, and they look beautiful.
Exactly, and that's why it was it was difficult for me to whenever I went to go and replace them to think about what I wanted to add and how I could improve the look beyond how much I already liked it. So I just I already had a lot of respect for the way they were designed initially.
Now, sort of going into a different topic, is there something you would love to see in-game but don't have the time to do it yourself because hopefully you're really busy making Lythidonia? Because again, 6 months. Remember that number.
I know. I think I would say probably more Daedric realms. I love visiting the Daedric realms that Bethesda has already made. The Deadlands and Shivering Isles in Oblivion, and then Apocrypha and Skyrim. They were so exciting to visit. It's just fun getting to travel to locations where the sky is the limit with how crazy the designers could go. Um, and I actually do plan to add a small portion of Moon Shadow that the player will get to visit in the Azurian Isles. And also in the past, I messed around with a project for Boethia's realm attribution share several years back. I think the Daedric realms are just something that I thoroughly enjoy.
Now, just out of curiosity, I know Pirate Lord tried to add a bunch of the realms of Oblivion in Daedric Lords to Morrowind at one point in time, and he released those as a resource. Have you ever looked at that mod?
Oh yeah, he was working on the that mod which added multiple Daedric realms. I know I downloaded it and I think I looked at it a little bit. I think he had couple areas to visit, Jagroth's realm. I think that was actually released before Oblivion, or at least it was done in a very different way than what we saw in the Shivering Isles. There were like floating rocks and stuff like that. Very very crazy. Very very fun to walk around in.
Oh yes, the sort of Oblivion version of the Daedric realms. I mean, outside the Shivering Isles was kind of disappointing, really.
Yeah, I know. I got, especially in the Deadlands, I got bored pretty quickly of the I think the five different instances of the Deadlands that we got to visit. But um, although the in Oblivion the Mehrunes Dagon and his minions and his realm and stuff were fairly stereotypical sort of uh, demons demons sort of thing. I thought it wasn't bad in the Badlands. It was kind of what I expected, but it was still enjoyable to visit. But it didn't even hold a candle to the Shivering Isles. For me, the Shivering Isles is what made Oblivion such a great game. It's to this day it's still my favorite expansion that's been made for an Elder Scrolls game.
Now, sort of going back to the construction set a little bit. If you had absolutely no constraints holding you back, besides the capabilities of the construction set and other programs, what mod would you most like to make outside of, say, Lythidonia?
I would have to say that going back to what I said previously, it would be Moonshadow. I have a lot of ideas that have kind of come alongside of making Lythidonia, which is heavily focused on Azura. I've got a lot of ideas for a mod based in Azura's realm. And in a perfect world where I had limitless amounts of time and concentration, when I finished Lythidonia, I would create an expansion for it where you would get to travel to Moonshadow and continue the story.
Now, I believe Moonshadow was actually featured in one of the Elder Scrolls novels. Have you read those, perchance?
I've read the first one, and I do remember the characters that kind of I think they run through it quickly, and I do have the description that's given of Moonshadow in my arsenal for what I would like to do with a mod based there.
Now, sort of going back to Oblivion, Have you had any experience with the creation kit for either Oblivion or Skyrim? And how would you say they compare to, say, Morrowind?
I have very little experience with Oblivion and none whatsoever with Skyrim. I tinkered in Oblivion in the Oblivion construction set a little bit, but to be honest, I actually found it difficult to use, and it could be that I didn't try at it for very long, but I could not even figure out how to give an NPC a new outfit. I would give it the outfit, save it, and then it wouldn't appear in game. I think there's something funny going on where there's like a double layer of references that go into NPCs. I'm not sure, but I did it for a little bit, but nothing too fancy. I never really made any mods, and then I'm actually purposefully avoiding modding Skyrim because I think that I would get drawn right in with all the new landscaping potential that is present in the creation kit. And so I want to avoid that until I actually complete the projects I have for Morrowind.
You know, it almost sounds like you're planning to ditch us for the Skyrim editor once you have Lythidonia complete. That's not the case, is it?
Of course not. I mean, that wouldn't even be possible. But if I did happen to dabble in modding Skyrim, we all know that no matter what I do, I'd always come back to Morrowind eventually.
Sure, that's what you want us to believe. Now, if you could make a single change to the capabilities of the construction set, what would it be exactly? I know you've mentioned the landscaping abilities of Skyrim being tempting, so probably something along those lines?
If I could add a single capability, it would absolutely be world spaces. As it is now, right, my dream of making Moon Shadow is pointless because in Morrowind it would have to be an island out in the inner sea rather than its own world. Um, but so world spaces is definitely the primary one. Other than that, I would I guess I'm kind of talking about this Moonshadow project now. Now it's on my mind, but other than that, I would really want Moonshadow to have its own unique weather, watercolor, and even a unique shader. So those are all the types of things that I cannot accomplish in Morrowind right now.
Sort of one of the other features that Morrowind lacks and what Skyrim has is dynamic water levels. Would that be something you would be interested in?
Right, absolutely, and that's something that the Morrowind modding community has struggled with for years, and we've come up with ways to fake it, but it's definitely a noticeable lack of modding Morrowind.
Indeed, and hopefully one that perhaps Open Morrowind will open the doors for in the future.
I've got my fingers crossed. I like to romanticize Open Morrowind that it's going to add all these fantastic new things that I'm going to get to play around with in the Open Morrowind construction set. So we'll see. I know that right now they're kind of intending to keep the same functionality with 1.0, so I kind of got my hopes bent on people or members of that same team making post 1.0 changes to the engine.
Since I've mentioned Open Morrowind, what do you think of that project, and do you plan to make any Open Morrowind only mods once it's released?
As I kind of alluded to before, I'm super excited about Open Morrowind. I talk to people about it when they ask about Morrowind, and what's going on right now with it. So I couldn't say right now for sure if I'll make any Open Morrowind only mods. I suppose if I could add new world spaces in Open Morrowind, and then obviously that would not translate back to vanilla Morrowind, then I have a feeling I would absolutely have to tinker around with that. So I'd say there's the possibility.
Speaking of other features, is there anything in particular you're looking forward to? Like, I know SWG mentioned that she was really looking forward to the weather system being de-hard coded.
Well, I mean, how many times can I say world space? I mean, that's that's really, one thing that I'd have a lot of fun with playing around with adding different areas, like in Oblivion, how we had the painted world that we got to visit, and then in Skyrim we've got various different areas we can visit as well. So there's that. But I guess other than that, I'm really looking forward to just things like the improved performance and stability of the game. Um, and then further out, I'm looking forward to things like new functionality for NPCs and the player being able to use multiple animation packages. And like we talked about earlier, basically functional water boxes, or just being able to vary the water level in different cells and that sort of thing. Um, many of the things really that we have in later titles, later Elder Scrolls titles, but we are currently lacking in Morrowind.
Now, do you think Open Morrowind is sort of what the community needs to revitalize itself going into the future? Or do you think it's only one aspect of what the community really needs to keep going forward?
I like to hope that the release of Open Morrowind will attract a lot of new modders and coders to the game. Especially, I've kind of thought about this, especially maybe if it comes out soon after Elder Scrolls 6 is getting hyped up. I can see it possibly getting a lot of attention. I haven't checked recently to see exactly when the Open Morrowind team is predicting 1.0 to hit our shelves, but um, yeah, just something that I had thought about recently. Because I know the announcement of Skyrim brought a lot of gamers and modders back to experience the older titles in the series, and I imagine that the Elder Scrolls 6 will do the same.
Now, are there any mods or modders in the community that currently have your attention outside of, say, Open Morrowind?
Yeah, I would say that well, one of the things that first comes to mind is Virus Legacy pretty much always has my attention, and that's one that's I've really been keeping an eye on the latest update that the author has pushed out, and really everything that Superstar has been working on recently is fantastic, like the T mod and the model replacers and that sort of thing. So Superstar definitely, I would say, um, has got my attention with what is working on right now. Other than that, I would say Danae has also been turning out some really sweet mods recently, which have caught my attention as well. They just have a lot of functionality and fun things to do in them.
Now, are there any mods that you've looked at and sort of thought, I wish I made that? Out of the mods out there in the community?
I wouldn't say necessarily that there are any that I look at and think that I wish I had made that, though I would say there are some which I see and think I wish I could have made that. Really, as in, I wish I had the skill set to do so. And that would usually amount to mods that have got really good texture work in them, or intricate scripting to do something very complicated, like Abbott's transportation mods, or when talking about textures, maybe any of an old friend's mods. He was always very good with his textures. I would say that in both of those areas, I've improved over the years. They're still my weakest points.
Oh yes, and an old friend released quite a few really high-res texture replacers. I don't know if he's still active in the community though.
I've talked to him not too long ago. I think he's I don't remember if he's doing professional sort of texture and modeling work. I think he is. he he's made a couple different models, I think, for various games, but I haven't talked to him very recently. But I don't think he's still active. At least, oh, I know he's not active, at least in the Morrowind community.
Now, we briefly touched upon this earlier, but what do you think about the other Elder Scrolls games, like Oblivion, Skyrim, and the Elder Scrolls Online?
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit before, but I would say, um, I guess starting from the beginning, I haven't actually even tried Arena. I've only played Daggerfall briefly. Whenever I tried playing it, at the time I didn't realize that it used this, swing the mouse type of attack system. So I actually got killed by a rat in the starter dungeon, and I shut the thing off in frustration. And I haven't actually booted that game up again since. And then we have talked about Oblivion and Skyrim a little bit, but yeah, so I played Oblivion a while after it came out, and I really enjoyed it. Um, yeah, me and my wife actually played through that game, and we're playing through Skyrim right now. Um, and my only complaints with Oblivion are that the meshes are overly smooth, and the world is, I guess, too bright. It makes Cyrodiil feel something like an amusement park. And then the main quest made it seem like Mirren's Dagon and his minions were your stereotypical demons, and then everyone looks like a potato. But the Shivering Isles, like I said before, made up for everything, and all is forgiven. SI is really still my favorite Elder Scrolls expansion yet. I actually like it even more than I enjoyed Dragonborn. Um, and I'm still playing through Skyrim, um, and as I mentioned before, I kind of held off on getting it until recently. So I'm still working through that game, but it's just a lot of fun to explore, and I really like the design. There's a lot of interesting quests to play. And like I said, that's kind of one of the reasons that I'm avoiding the creation kit, is because I think I would probably get drawn in, and then I never finish my projects for Morrowind.
Oh, yes, and we wouldn't want that. I mean, you wouldn't betray the community like that, surely.
I don't think that I would have it in me. No, I would. And like I said, even if I did, mess around with the creation kit, we all know that we always come back. So, but I am avoiding it so that I can get through Lythidonia before I do any tinkering in the creation kit.
Alright, what do you think makes the Morrowind modding community so vibrant after more than a decade?
Well, credit where credit is due. I mean, Morrowind is a fantastic game. It throws out a lot of the stereotypes just when you play through the main quest. I mean, you're the champion of a Daedra who has questionable motives. Your arch nemesis is a villain in a gray area of morality. Um, it was enthralling for me to play through. Really, every time that I play through it, I see something that I didn't notice before. And then there's the construction set itself. While maybe not as powerful as the construction or the CK, the creation kit, it's relatively easy to pick up. I mean, I taught myself how to use it. I never opened a tutorial until a year or more after I've been using the CS extensively. Um, and I think there's something about the game which keeps bringing us back. And I might go off and play something else for a while, but I'll find myself wanting to walk through the mushroom forest on Sheogorath Island again, and I'll be right back here playing Morrowind. And I've heard others say the same sort of thing. Morrowind just has that quality which, once you appreciate it, you never really lose the taste for it.
Oh yes, it is probably one of the most beloved RPGs from the last decade or so. It has a very loyal following, and I certainly hope that it continues to have a loyal following in the years to come, and people don't abandon it for fancy new creation kit software.
I would hope the exact same thing. Now, come on. Now, I'm not going to be abandoning Morrowind. Just experiencing other things. Getting it. It'll just be inspiration for a new Morrowind mod.
Sure, sure. I'll believe it when we see it. Now, do you think there's anything the Morrowind modding community should be doing in order to continue to expand and grow in the coming years? Obviously, you've already been somewhat of a big part of the discussion, having hosted the Future of Morrowind discussion thread back in July.
Yeah, I think that, really, a lot of what's going on right now in the community is a fantastic thing. And I think, just people modders continuing to churn out mods and, welcoming new modders to the community is a big thing. And I think the community, the Morrowind community is something that is already it's mature over the years. It's been over 10 years since this game was released, and now there's always a new mod being released. It seems like at least on a weekly basis. And as we discussed earlier, I mean, just today there were a couple different mods that were released on the Nexus. And that's just crazy that this long afterwards there's still that much activity. um, and beyond just the modders, I think that things like your YouTube channel here, and then Open Morrowind are really just the sort of thing that can help make people and keep people interested in trying out this game.
Now, sort of going on to our final bit of topics, is there any advice you'd like to give to budding new Morrowind modders out there looking to release their first mod?
Have fun. Make whatever you want. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There's a lot of people on Bethesda's official forums who are more than happy to help out with any problems that you might come into, or just provide some tips. Myself included. I'm on the official forums, as are you, and I think that a lot of modders, they kind of isolate themselves sometimes without, and not intentionally, just not necessarily realizing that there's a larger community out there than just the people who comment on their mod. There's a larger community out there which is interactive and can help. So I try to, whenever I help out new modders, which I try to do whenever I have time, or whenever I notice that it is that someone is interested in having help. I always try to just mention, you know suggest, hey, go visit the official forums, just because I didn't do that for the longest time. Whenever I was modding, I was one of the modders who was fairly isolated for most of the earlier years that I was modding Morrowind. And I just think it's something that really helps improve both the creativity and the productivity, so that you can maybe do things with the game that you didn't realize you could do before.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've sort of been guilty of the isolation aspect in the past before, where I read the comments on my mods and I didn't really participate in anything else. But it is important to remember that, as you said, the Morrowind modding community is a very mature community. It is really what I would consider a sort of a fountain of positivity. I've never really encountered a whole lot of trolls in the community, so opening up can lead to a lot more creative and productive potential.
Right, exactly. And that goes right along with what I was saying. I just think that the community's there, and it's awesome to have new people joining and participating in the discussions that we have. So, and I don't remember exactly how many posts I've got on the official forum now, but I've got quite a few, and I like to chime in and add my 2 cents to discussions that go on there, and it's just a lot of fun. Um, Talking with people who enjoy the game and appreciate it as much as I do.
Oh yes, you do have quite the hefty post count. Though you really should, I don't know, maybe continue working on Lythidonia as much as you do posting, and not that posting things isn't a bad. It's not bad. It's just Lythidonia.
Well, I know that I don't know if it still keeps track of it on the forum anymore, but I know whenever I first joined, I posted quite a bit. I think when I first joined, I had like, I guess maybe nowadays it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I had like 11 posts per day was my average. I think whenever I first joined the official forums. If it's still keeping track, I'm sure it's gone down a lot since then, but still, I think I've got a couple thousand posts by now. It's hard to believe I had that much to say on different topics, but I guess if we've been talking for over an hour here, maybe it's not too surprising.
Oh yeah. It's, thousands of posts, 11 posts a day is quite a lot. Coming from someone who only recently had an average of 5 posts a year.
But
Now,
you've gotten a lot more active recently.
oh yeah, of course. I mean, I'm running a YouTube channel now. I have to be active.
Well, now you don't have any time to post now. You've got to make all these videos to keep your viewers happy like me.
Oh yes. As long as you're also working on Lythidonia when you're watching.
Well, I can whenever I'm watching these interviews, but unfortunately, whenever I'm watching the modding showcases, I have to pay attention.
I don't know. You could get a second monitor. Plug that into the side, watch it over there, work on your multi on the main screen.
It's not a bad idea. I think I may need to work on my efficiency if that's the case.
Yes, efficiency. That's the key. 6 months. Tick tock, tick tock.
I'm working towards it, but gotta get this stinking laptop I'm on right now to gotta rein it in, get it under control, or get a new one.
Yes. Get a desktop PC and you won't have these problems anymore.
Very true. Build it myself too.
Definitely build it yourself. That's the only way to go, really. Now, finally, is there anyone in the community you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I would say Chaka ZG. Chaka and I we've been good buddies for several years now. Thanks actually to Morrowind. I met him on the forums here, and we've chatted over Skype. We were part of a Skype group of a bunch of Morrowind modders where we chatted about various things, and so who knows, someday I'll cross the 4,500 miles over there and get a tour of Croatia from him. But yeah, I would say Chaka.
Alright, that pretty much concludes the interview, so now you can finally get back to working on Lythidonia and getting that right out there in the 6-month timeline.
That's the plan. Will do.
Alright, that concludes our interview with Melchior, and it was a very interesting interview if I do say so myself. And of course, everyone should join me in reminding him about that 6-month deadline for Lythidonia. And yes, we certainly also don't want him joining up with the Skyrim modders. So, yes, we need to keep a short leash on him. Anyway, next week we might have Yeti finally for an interview. And if we don't, we'll be having Zinni from the Open Morrowind project. And that should definitely be very interesting. So tune in next week, and I'll see you guys next time.